Relay connection established. Archive access granted. Origin unknown. Verification impossible. Proceeding with recovered transmission. Designation, Ninth Relay.
Most people believe you can tell what killed an animal just by looking at the body, and most of the time they're right. Wolves leave one kind of damage, mountain lions another, and bears never bother hiding what they've done. After 19 years as a predator specialist with Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks, I could usually identify the culprit before I even stepped out of my truck. Then I got a call from a ranch outside Choteau that changed everything I thought I knew. Not because of what I found, but because of what was missing. My name is Daniel Hayes, and for nearly 2 decades, my job has been investigating livestock deaths across Montana. Ranchers don't call people like me out of curiosity. They call because something is killing their livelihood, and they want answers. 9 times out of 10, the explanation is simple. Wolves testing weak fences, a grizzly wandering farther south than usual, or a mountain lion growing bold. Nature isn't always pretty, but it's usually predictable. The Morrison Ranch didn't feel predictable from the moment I arrived. 6 black Angus cattle lay scattered across an open pasture. At first glance, it resembled a wolf attack, but within seconds, I knew it wasn't. Wolves chased their prey, scattering the herd and leaving signs of panic. Hoof marks, broken fences, torn earth, but none of that was present. The grass around each carcass looked almost untouched. The cattle hadn't run. They had simply fallen where they stood. I knelt beside the nearest animal and saw that its neck had been crushed with unbelievable force, not torn apart or chewed, just compressed until the vertebrae snapped cleanly. There wasn't much blood, and no flesh had been eaten. Even the coyotes had stayed away. I moved from one carcass to the next and found the same injury, the same untouched bodies, until I noticed something else. Every single animal was facing east. At first I assumed it was coincidence, but when I checked again, all 6 were aligned exactly the same way. I asked the rancher if he had moved any of them, and he looked offended, asking why he would. He was right. Ranchers don't drag 1,200-pound cattle around for decoration. I searched for tracks and initially thought I'd found wolf prints, but the more I studied them, the less sense they made. 4 toes, a heavy pad, no visible claw marks, too large for a wolf and too narrow for a bear, with a stride longer than any canine I'd ever documented. I photographed everything and collected hair snagged on an old fence post. Dark gray, thick, and coarse. Then bagged it for DNA testing, and drove back convinced the lab would tell me I was overlooking something obvious. Instead, the technician called me 2 days later and said they couldn't identify it. It didn't match wolf, dog, coyote, fox, cougar, bear, nothing in their database. I told her to rerun it, but they already had. I stared out my office window for a long time after hanging up. Unknown DNA occasionally showed up if a sample was contaminated, but this sample wasn't contaminated. It was simply unknown. The following week, another ranch called. 5 cattle, all with crushed necks, all facing east. Then another call came in, and another. The attack spread across nearly 60 miles, but they all shared the same impossible details. No feeding, no panic, no scavengers, and every animal facing east. The media blamed wolves almost immediately, as they always do, and by the end of the month, local papers were demanding predator control, even though every biologist in the department privately admitted the evidence didn't point to wolves. We installed trail cameras across several ranches, but within 3 nights half of them disappeared, not smashed or chewed, but unscrewed and removed. Something had carefully twisted them off the trees and taken them. One camera survived because its mounting bracket jammed, and when we recovered the SD card, everyone crowded into the office to watch. The first image showed an empty pasture beneath a full moon. The second image, taken less than a second later, filled the entire frame with coarse gray fur. There was nothing else. No eye, no mouth, just thick gray fur pressed against the lens, as though whatever approached had leaned in to inspect it before removing it. No one said anything after the footage ended. A week later, while I was checking fence lines outside Augusta, an old pickup rolled slowly into the pasture. An elderly native man climbed out, moving with the steady confidence of someone who knew exactly where he was going. He looked at the dead cattle for less than a minute before asking if they were facing east. I hadn't released that information, so I asked how he knew. He didn't answer right away, only nodding once, almost sadly, and saying that meant it wasn't feeding. When I asked what that meant, he looked toward the mountains and told me his grandfather had spoken of something older than wolves, older than the first horses, something most people called the Shunka Warakin. I had heard the name before, usually around campfires after a few beers, described as a strange predator bigger than a wolf, sometimes like a hyena, sometimes like something else entirely, a legend. I told him I didn't believe in monsters, and he smiled, saying he hadn't asked if I believed. Before leaving, he added one more sentence. If I followed it, I shouldn't interrupt what it was doing. Then he drove away. I wish I had listened. 3 days later, another attack occurred high in the foothills, and this time the tracks led somewhere instead of disappearing into rocky ground. I followed them on foot as the trail climbed steadily through pine forest for hours. The prints remained fresh, but I never heard the animal. Occasionally, I found broken branches 6 feet above the ground, or bark stripped from trees, as though something powerful had brushed against them. Then the forest fell silent. No birds, no squirrels, not even insects, and it was the kind of silence that made my own breathing sound too loud. I topped a ridge just before sunset and saw a broad alpine meadow unlike anything I had ever seen. Hundreds of elk stood motionless across the grass, along with dozens of mule deer, several wolves, a massive bull moose, and even a grizzly bear near the tree line. Natural enemies stood only yards apart, yet none acknowledged the others. Every single animal faced east, and none moved or made a sound. I raised my camera, but couldn't bring myself to press the shutter. The air felt heavy, as though the entire mountain was waiting. Then something stepped from the trees. I never saw it clearly, only gray fur, a sloping back, long front legs, and a broad head carried low. It moved without hurry, crossing the meadow in complete silence. The wolves lowered their heads as it passed. The bear looked away, and the elk didn't flee. The creature walked among them slowly, almost deliberately, pausing beside certain animals before continuing onward. It wasn't hunting. It was inspecting, counting, judging. I don't know how long it remained there. 5 minutes, maybe 20. But time didn't feel normal. Finally, it reached the eastern edge of the meadow and disappeared into the trees. Only then did the silence break. A bird chirped somewhere overhead. The elk began grazing. The wolves wandered into the timber, and the bear ambled toward a stream, as though nothing unusual had happened. Within minutes, the meadow looked perfectly ordinary. I stood there alone, wondering if I had imagined everything. Eventually, I tracked down the old man at a small house outside Browning and told him what I had seen. He listened without interrupting, then nodded and said his grandfather had always said the Shunka Warakin was never a hunter. I pointed out that it had killed dozens of cattle, but he shook his head and said it hadn't killed them. It had chosen them. He stared out his window toward the distant Rockies and explained that when the balance of the mountains shifted, it walked. Not because it was hungry, but because something had to decide what would be taken so everything else could live. I asked if he truly believed that, and he gave me the same tired smile, reminding me that I had watched wolves stand beside elk and bears beside deer, and asking what explanation made more sense. 3 weeks later, the state announced an emergency wolf reduction program after pressure from several ranching groups. Wildlife officials selected specific packs based on population studies and livestock losses, and the operation began at sunrise. The exact morning every animal in that meadow had been facing east. I still work for Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks, and most of the investigations make sense. Wolves, bears, mountain lions. Sometimes young officers ask me about the old stories, mentioning the Shunka Warakin with a grin, expecting me to laugh along with them, but I never do. I don't think it was ever just a story, and I don't think it was ever a monster. Predators kill because they're hungry, and people kill because they're angry, but that thing in the mountains killed because something had already been decided, long before any of us arrived. The question isn't whether the Shunka Warakin still exists. The question is whether somewhere beyond the tree line, it has already looked at you and decided.
Transmission complete. Archive updated. Relay connection terminated. Signal lost.